Coming up on the Sarc Fighter podcast.
I went to see a hand specialist, and he recommended we go in and take a look. They call it a lumpectomy of my tendon sheath.
Kevin McDevitt's sarcoidosis first showed up on his finger.
So he cut an incision in my finger, and he told me later it was like pulling spaghetti out.
But eventually, it would get worse. Much worse.
And they came back with a diagnosis of possible sarcoidosis.
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 30 of the Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. The Sarc Fighter podcast is brought to you in part by a grant from aTyr Pharma, and you can hear an interview with Sanjay Shukla, the CEO of aTyr, in episode 17 of the Sarc Fighter podcast. And you've heard me say before, we do the podcast to offer fellow Sarc fighters hope. And later in 2021, the effectiveness of this new drug by aTyr will come into clearer view as clinical trials evolve. So stay tuned for information on that as we look for maybe a new drug that can be very effective in fighting sarcoidosis. At this point, it looks promising, but we just don't know. The official Sarc Fighter song, called Zombie, is by Mark Steyer, who plays in a band called the White Hot Lizards. And Mark's story, the story behind the lyrics, which will mean a lot to most of you, I would say, is in episode 12. And he gladly donated that song to the podcast, and the proceeds from that song go to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Of course, I call this the Sarc Fighter podcast because I'm fighting Sarc, so are you. Whether you're a caregiver, a patient, a researcher, wherever you are in this space, you're listening because of sarcoidosis. And my goal here is just to try and touch on all the different aspects of sarcoidosis, whether it's a way to deal with it, a way to deal with the drugs, whether we look at medicines that might be effective, whether we look at ways to just talk to one another, to make ourselves understand, feel better. Sometimes it feels good just to sort of normalize your situation. When, you know, the things that are happening to our bodies and to our lives are drastic, and some people don't find comfort in knowing that other people are going through something similar, but a lot of people do. When you realize that you're not alone fighting this, and that there are other people who are suffering through this, and they're finding a way to get on, and that's kind of where I'm trying to shine a light. So, and you know, when you do that, we look at reasons for hope. We look at all the stuff going on with FSR. You see the fundraisers, you see the events, you find a way to participate, and that helps you fight back a little bit. And normally that will make most people feel like they're doing something, which will in turn make them feel a little bit better. They're doing something to be helpful. I normally release this podcast, by the way, on every other Monday, and I've noticed that you guys really tune in on the release days. I can go in the background of my little website here, and I can see whenever we release a new Sarc Fighter podcast that the number of listens jumps dramatically. And I wish I could do more, but right now I've got a full-time job and a small business and lots of grandkids and so forth, and that's about as often as I can realistically put out a new podcast. But I'm doing what I can, and maybe eventually we'll look at maybe a way to do it a little bit more often, because it does seem like there's an appetite for it, and I cannot tell you how gratifying that is. When I first launched this idea just about a year ago, I had no idea if we would ever get more than 10 listens, and we're in the approaching 14,000 downloads right now, and that just tickles me to death. If you are new to sarcoidosis and you're trying to figure out what you have, what's going on with your body, you might want to consider listening to my interview with Dr. Simon Hart in episode 2. It's sort of like Sarcoidosis 101, and a lot of people have gone to that. In fact, I would say that as of the last time I looked, it was the most listened to podcast here on the show. Of course, it's been out there the longest, and a lot of people will go and listen to back episodes, but that, I think, is indicative of what people are searching for. If you want to know more about me and my story, that is episode 1. And if you want to know the backstory to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research and how it came into being, then check out episode 11 with the founders, Andrea and Redding Wilson. Andrea is a fellow Sarc Fighter, and 20 years ago, there was no foundation, and there was no central organization helping to fight the disease, and now there is. Now, I want to say it was just a year ago that the pandemic struck in a big way. I'm recording this on March 13th of 2021. I remember because I was traveling to Cleveland for an appointment at the Cleveland Clinic. It's 7 hours from my house. And we were starting to get information over the radio during that 3-day trip that things like March Madness were being canceled, the NBA season put on hold, you name it. And then we really started to see how serious this pandemic was. And at the time, we didn't know, of course, how long it would last. But now a year later, the vaccine has been released, and so we're starting to come out of it. But one of the big casualties immediately in our little corner of the world, in our space, as it were, was all the activity of FSR, all the people trying to do events for Sarcoidosis Awareness Month, which is April. So that meant no 5Ks, no walks, no meetups, no summits in person for the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Right here in Roanoke, I was just getting the ball rolling, and I had a forum scheduled here at a local theater where I live, and I had speakers lined up, and we were going to build a support group out of that, and it all just died. It just died. So this year, the team at FSR has done a little bit of a pivot. So some things to consider as we come up on Sarcoidosis Awareness Month would be the following. On Tuesday, March 30th, you could look at the Sarc Social, the impact of art, creatively communicating your experience from 4 to 5 p.m. Central Time, where you would continue to find footing and creating hope in our challenging times. FSR invites you to join patient advocate, artist, and poet Delshawn Williams as he shares the impact of art on his sarcoidosis journey. And I'll put a link to that. Also, coming up, Steps for Sarc, the virtual endurance challenge, April 1st through April 30th, to raise awareness and unite the community during Sarcoidosis Awareness Month. FSR is hosting a month-long virtual endurance and fundraising challenge, and I'll put a link to that. World Sarcoidosis Day is coming up on Wednesday, April 13th, and from 4 to 5:30 Central Time. There'll be a virtual event, and the FSR and advocates will be hosting a celebration. So that's something to put on your calendar. Sarc Social on Saturday, April 17th. Life with sarcoidosis is full of setbacks, renegotiating what you can and cannot do anymore, having a mindset focused on growth, and so forth. So join FSR patient advocate Trina Massey Davis as she shares her story on how shifting her mindset has a ripple effect on her life. And again, we'll put a link to that. Then there's a segment on eating, cooking, and nutrition on Saturday, April 17th, and that'll be from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Central Time. There's Memorial Monday Candlelight Vigil on April 26th from 5 to 6 p.m. Central Time, again hosted by FSR. So that's just a quick look at the FSR calendar, some things that are going on, and Sarcoidosis Awareness Month does live on even in these more difficult times. Also, there is another group out there doing a lot of good work, and it was founded by Frank Rivera, Cheryl Bradford, and Carrie Wong, and others. I mentioned those three because they've already been guests here on the Sarc Fighter podcast. They have a really strong website and a presence in the battle. Their presence is much appreciated, and it's called Stronger Than Sarcoidosis. And they have a national online support group that meets on the first Tuesday and the third Thursday of the month from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They're really doing a lot of great things, and I'll have a link to their organization in the show notes as well. Now, just a couple of requests before we jump into this really interesting interview today with Keven. I appreciate your interest in the Sarc Fighter podcast. Please help me reach more people and grow the show. And it would work if you would just share the episode on your social media, share the link. And if you like it, just tell one person. Just reach out and say, hey, did you hear the Sarc Fighter podcast? Today they were talking about diet, or they were talking about a guy was talking about how it showed up on his finger. And when the doctor went in, it was like pulling out strands of spaghetti. It's kind of gross, but it's kind of interesting too if you wonder what one of these non-caseating granulomas looks like. So, just please just help me give the show a little bit of a boost. It's much appreciated. Now, I do want to pick up on a topic that I left off with, which is diet. A year ago, there was so much that I didn't know about sarcoidosis, and when I started the podcast, I began to notice patterns in people's stories, and there was a lot of interest in whether diet can affect how we feel, specifically anti-inflammatory diets. I didn't hear from anybody for a long time, but eventually Sarc fighter Ryan Norenberg came on in episode 27 to say that it had worked for him. He had a severe case of sarcoidosis, cardiac sarcoidosis. He started eating anti-inflammatory foods. He does take a dose of CBD every day, and he now controls his cardiac sarc very well. And then, so during our discussion, he told me that his wife, Lindsey, gave up her first very successful career. She started studying diet and has become a licensed dietitian, holistic nutritionist. And she launched something called Nourish by Lindsey to help other people achieve what she helped him do. And I am one of her first clients. In fact, to be honest, I am her first client. She tells me that is not friend or family, and she is helping me gratis. But she has really been a great help. We have done several Zoom calls. She has led me into a couple of new things. I've begun taking a probiotic called Just Thrive, which helps me get my gut in shape, and I'm learning a lot about leaky gut and some other things, and how your biome affects so much of your life that you don't realize that there's a lot of regulation even of your brain and your emotions that happens in the gut. So I'm taking that, and I've been doing that for a little less than a month. I'm also on day 13 as I speak to you of a 21-day elimination diet. Last time I recorded a podcast, I was considering doing this. I launched it on May 1st. I have eliminated everything that the dietary world believes causes inflammation. So no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, which leaves you with just about nothing. So lots of grilled chicken, lots of vegetables. And I can't tell you that I love it, but I can eat as much as I want. So I'm not really hungry all the time, but I do still crave sweets. I would love to have a cookie. But at this point, even bananas and apples are off the table because they are too sugary. So lots of salads, lots of beans, lots of kale, smoothies every morning. Think of it as a paleo diet. I can have buffalo or grass-fed beef, and son of a gun, I might go out and buy myself a big grass-fed steak for tonight. But we'll see. I did do a recent bike ride, and this is critical because if you listen, you know that cycling is my passion. And the weather finally broke here in Western Virginia in the mountains, so we tried to go out and ride a 36-mile ride last weekend, and I completely bonked. I got to about mile 27, 28, and I had nothing left in the tank. And I had to cheat a little bit and carry an energy gel with me, which is what marathoners use and cyclists. It looks like a gel in a ketchup package from a fast food joint, but it's just pure energy and it's all sugar. And I had to basically swallow one of those and some water, and that got me home. And then I spoke with Lindsey about it the next day, and she told me that I was ill-advised to try a bicycle ride of that distance on this diet because there's no carbs in this diet, and there was just nothing in my tank. So, okay, lesson learned. I'll back off on long distance bike rides. I have done some shorter ones, and I've been okay. But otherwise, other than that, I have not cheated. I can tell you so far, I don't feel much different in terms of inflammation or anything related to my sarcoidosis. I have had a couple of days where I was hangry, hungry and angry, moody, if you will. I'm not at a point where I can report any conclusions. I will say that there have been days where my legs felt less sarky because I have neurosarc. And there are days when this numbness because of the neurosarc, which is caused by basically by an interruption of messages from my brain to the lower half of my body on my spinal cord because of the sarcoid on my spinal cord, the numbness can feel a little bit worse. And something like a pizza, which would be full of gluten and cheese and dairy and all kinds of probably other stuff, pepperoni, processed foods, you name it. It's about as processed as it can get. The sugar in the sauce, everything in a pizza is bad. According to conventional wisdom, I love pizza. But after I have a couple slices of pizza, I do feel terrible. So I haven't felt terrible, but and this is just temporary. The elimination diet is to get me to a point where I can slowly start adding things back in and see if there are triggers. So if I have a piece of wheat toast and that is full of gluten and all of a sudden I feel like crap 2 hours later, I know, okay, gluten's a trigger. If I have some cheese and crackers and the dairy product is a problem, okay, I know that. If I have a slice of pie and it's full of sugar, then I'll know that. I really don't want to know that because I like those things. On the other hand, if it makes me feel better over the long term and it controls my emotions and my gut health improves, then it's something I'm going to take a serious look at. And you can come along with me on that journey. But that's where I am. That's where I am right now. Okay? So I will just keep you posted. Now, today my interview is with Kevin McDevitt. He lives outside Philadelphia. As you heard in the little teaser at the front, his sarc first showed up in his ring finger. I've never heard of that. I'll tell you that. He finally, because he couldn't golf, his golf grip was interrupted. Can't have that, right? He ignored it for a while, and then it came back with a vengeance. Eventually, it presented in his heart and became a very serious condition. And so now again, we have a Sarc Fighter who is active, physically fit, rode bicycles, ran, jogged, did whatever he wanted to do, and now he's reduced to wondering why he can't do anything. Even basic stuff like walking made him exhausted, and you're going to hear him talk about that. You'll hear him talk about something he calls parasarcoidosis, which for me is a new term. I want to learn more about that. And then also like Ryan Norenberg, Lindsey's husband and fellow Sarc Fighter, and my role model for this auto-inflammatory eating, Keven has found great success with eliminating inflammatory foods from his diet. So he'll be talking about all of that coming up, my interview with Kevin McDevitt.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the Sarc Fighter podcast. Joining me now is Kevin McDevitt from Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. Welcome today, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, John. I really want to acknowledge you for who you've been for the sarcoidosis community and your contribution to that. I heard your podcast last year and have tuned into just about every single episode. It was good to hear someone else's stories, and it's been great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm starting to hear that from other people. And as you had mentioned, you live right outside Philadelphia, a major metro area, and you didn't know anybody else who had sarcoidosis.
Right.
Whereas I live in a smaller city, certainly a more rural area. And I didn't either at first. So, but I would have thought if you lived in Philadelphia, then, you'd know half a dozen people.
Yeah, I'm going to the Jefferson Sarcoidosis Clinic. And I still haven't met anyone that has sarcoidosis.
Wow.
I've been there for a year.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot.
So, yeah.
Well, listen, so you were first diagnosed when something showed up on your finger. Tell me about that.
Yes. So in 2010, I had a lump in my ring finger, and it would prevent me from getting my fingertip to my palm of my hand. Like I couldn't make a fist, and it would get better and worse and better and worse. And eventually it started to interfere with my golf game. So something had to be done.
Yeah.
So I went to see a hand specialist, and he recommended we go in and take a look. They call it a lumpectomy. So he cut an incision in my finger, and he told me later it was like pulling spaghetti out of my tendon sheath. And he sent it off to the lab to be analyzed, and it wasn't cancerous. And they came back with a diagnosis of possible sarcoidosis. So he sent it back saying, it's in his hand, not in his lungs. Try again. Right. And they came back and said, it still looks like sarcoidosis. So he sent me to a pulmonologist, and we did an x-ray, and that came back with some things of concern. And the next step was a bronchoscopy, where they send a tube down your throat into your lungs, and they take a sample of something that looks interesting. And it was confirmed as sarcoidosis in 2010.
Okay, so at that point in 2010, you have it on your ring finger, and I assume they removed the lump and you were able to continue to play golf, first of all, the most important thing. Okay.
No, actually it came right back. It came
did?
right back. Yes. So it eventually came back, and it was, it was what it was. Sometimes it would be better, sometimes it would be worse, but it was still there.
All right. And you also had some presentation in your lungs?
Lungs and the lymph nodes.
Okay. But as I recall from our previous correspondence, your doctor said the treatment is worse than the disease, so you stayed off of prednisone at that point?
I didn't do anything, right? So it was quiescent, so there was no action necessary. And yes, prednisone was definitely worse than the slight impact it had on my lung function. So I noticed over the years that I used to play soccer, I used to ride my bike, I used to be very active. As I got into my corporate life and my career, some of that fitness dwindled off until the point where, high intensity aerobics was a problem for me. I never knew what it was. I just figured I was out of shape.
Right.
And it turns out it was, we are getting old, but
right.
It was also an expression of the sarcoidosis in limited lung function.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like about a 10-15% reduction in my lung function from a normal person, which for me, being an athlete, was probably more like 25-30%.
Right.
But anyway, it as long as I didn't try and get crazy about my physical output, it was fine. Right? I could deal with it. I could walk quickly, but I couldn't run for a long time. Things like that.
Right.
So yeah, he's like, it seems stable. We'll monitor it in 2 years. Okay. So every 2 years, I was going back for a CT scan to monitor it. And in 2012, 2014, 2016, it was all stable. Not improving, not getting worse. And it was like, oh, this is what I got, and no problem.
Okay. So it's just, all right. You didn't adjust your diet. You didn't do anything like that.
Actually, in 2012, I did adjust my diet. And this was my son driving it. He wanted to try keto, the Atkins diet. So the whole family went on keto.
Okay.
And I loved it. I mean, it's like bacon, eggs, and just pile on the fat. It was awesome because it was everything my doctor was telling me not to do.
Right.
Because I'm trying to reduce my cholesterol, right? Stay away from fat. No, it doesn't work that way. Actually, my cholesterol came down, my weight came down, and the inflammation went away. Like my hand was fine. I'm like, oh my God, what happened? So I'm like, oh, the diet and this inflammation is related. So that was my first clue, if you would. And it's really been great because over the past 10 years, I haven't been on an Atkins diet the whole time.
Right.
But as I would stray from the adherence to that and get a few too many carbs, a couple of IPAs and some apple pie with ice cream, if I ate too many carbs, it would flare. I would feel it in my finger and I would know that I need to back off on the carbs.
Wow.
So it's like an early warning indicator.
I mean, if you're going to have I wish I had an early warning system.
Yeah, right.
That's my fingers started hurting a little bit. Like, all right, I have to go ride my bike 20 miles to find out if I'm not feeling good. That's my thermometers I've talked about.
Yeah, there you go.
So, all right. So you were cruising along for about 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And then all of a sudden something happened. When did things get worse?
So in 2018, I had a pulmonary function test, a cardiopulmonary exercise test, and things were actually improving. Like I was just cruising along and they're on their way up and I'm feeling good about it. In 2020, in January, I'm sitting at a stoplight in North Philly and boom, I get rear-ended by an SUV doing some version of 35, 40 miles an hour.
Ooh.
And it was a violent impact, but my airbag didn't go off, his did. He pushed me out to the intersection, no cross traffic, so no secondary collision. I pulled off to the side of the road, was a little shaken up, but otherwise felt fine. Right? I knew my body was concussed a little bit, but nothing bleeding, nothing broken. We went out, exchanged information, and went home.
Wow. Okay. You drove the car home.
I drove the car home. Yeah. I mean, I got the trunk down and, other than looking horrible, it was drivable and his was drivable. So we just left. The next morning, I felt awful, like really tired, fatigued, a little foggy. And I'm like, well, I was just in an accident.
Yeah, you had that big adrenaline burst and all the kind of, they call it shockiness. So that you could be attributed to that.
Yeah. So it wasn't unexpected. The second day I felt even worse, and really had nothing in the tank. Like just absolutely sat in a chair all day, hanging out, watching TV, and sleeping. The third day I got up and I'm like, this isn't working. I go to the hospital. And I present in the emergency department with atrial fibrillation, AFib. That's easier. Easy for me to say.
Right. Yeah.
So I present with AFib, and they're like, "Yeah, you got some bumps and bruises, but your heart's in distress right now." So they cardiovert me, get me back into normal rhythm with medication. And take all their CTs and x-rays and nothing's broken. And they send me home. And I go to CVS to pick up my medication and I don't remember my phone number.
What?
My cell phone number, which I've had for 10 years.
Yeah.
I can't remember it. I literally have to look it up in my phone. So I knew that was a problem.
Talk about brain fog.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And so from that point forward, it was like just unbelievable sequence of events. So the next thing was a cardiac stress test.
Okay.
So after some period of time to recover from the bumps and bruises, I went into the cardiologist's office and I was walking on the treadmill, all hooked up with the EKG equipment. And after 5 minutes, they're like, okay, you're done. I'm like, oh, that wasn't too bad. Well, they stopped the test because my heart was so bad.
Really?
Yes. I mean,
So
I didn't break a
they were
sweat.
concerned that if you continued, that
Yes.
something bad was going to happen.
Yes. And I sat down with the cardiologist. He's like, you have this, PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, VT, ventricular tachycardia, and SVT, sustained tachycardia, all these different arrhythmias in my heart. And I had never had heart issues. Always been an athlete. Had 2 years prior, I had my stress test, and there was I was hooked up to an EKG the entire time. There's no problem.
Wow.
So something happened, and whether it was the accident or something else, but they had to find out what the root cause was. So then I got introduced to an electrophysiologist who specializes in heart rhythm.
Right.
And he's like, this is very serious. I'm like, well, how serious? Because, I'm not into surgery. I'm not into medication. I have no medication.
Right.
And he's like, this is like drop dead serious.
And nobody
have an arrhythmia,
sarcoidosis in this context?
It got in my heart.
Yeah, but the doctor and you were not talking about sarcoidosis
Not at that point in time.
Nobody had thought that what was in your finger.
They were thinking it was a
heart.
possibility, but they have a procedure, a process to go through to eliminate everything else. Like everything in sarcoidosis, it's nothing else, so it must be sarcoidosis.
Right. Just like on a house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't know, just say sarcoidosis.
Just say sarcoidosis. Right. It fits everything.
Yes, it's the catch-all. Like I told my kids, hydrogen bonding. If you don't know what the answer is, hydrogen bonding.
Hydrogen
is
bonding?
probably the answer. Yes.
Okay, I'll remember that.
That's the sarcoidosis of physics and chemistry.
Got it.
So after the stress test, I met with the electrophysiologist who's like, number one, we have a pandemic ongoing, right? We see it in China, we're seeing it in Europe, and it's serious. And with your condition, you need to be very concerned about it. And with your arrhythmias, we're recommending that we implant an ICD. It's an implantable cardioversion device.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pacemaker,
right?
And it's the paddles.
The paddles, yeah. Mm-hmm. Shocks you back if something happens.
Yes, if you have an arrhythmia, it can shock you back. If your heart stops, it can shock you back.
Right.
And if you have the heart block, where your heart stops, it can pace your heart at a preset amount. I'm like, I don't know. And then I talked to some people about it, and we had a real serious conversation. And with the pandemic, like just starting to take off in the United States, we're like, we need to get ahead of this. If I'm going into a hospital, I want to go in now, not a month from now.
Right. So was this March of 2020?
It was April 1st.
April 1st,
so March,
right after it started. Okay.
Yeah. So we're talking 2 months after the accident.
Right.
I've got like stress tests and arrhythmias, and now I'm getting a artificial pacemaker put in my chest, and I still don't know what the cause is. And prior to this accident, I've never had any heart issues. So then the next step was a PET scan, and I'm looking right now at the image on my wall, and it was scary. My whole entire left ventricle was encircled with sarcoidosis, and my left atria was partially involved, and the septum wall in between. And that's what was causing the arrhythmias.
Mm.
It was completely involved in my heart.
Wow. So now it's April. You've figured out that it's sarcoidosis. You at this point you had decided, but had you actually received the pacemaker?
Yes, April 1st I got the pacemaker.
Okay.
April 13th I got the PET scan.
Okay. So now the pandemic is starting to become a full-fledged thing, and your sarcoidosis is deciding this would be a great time to show up in a big way.
Exactly.
Man. So what do they do? What did you do?
Well, they put me on 40 milligrams of prednisone immediately. I went through my honeymoon period with that beloved drug, that awful drug.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're like, well, we got to do this for a while, and then we'll do another PET scan and see if it's clear. And if it is, then we'll back it off. If not, we increase it or keep it steady, and we go from there. So I'm like, okay. About 3 weeks after I started prednisone, the psychotic effects started kicking in.
From the
prednisone. It was like melting my mind. I was really difficult to be around. Between the mood swings, the anger, the paranoid episodes, the delusions, the manic depression. It was crazy. It was crazy town.
Wow.
So it was really nuts.
Right. And I tell you what, I mean, I could probably go toe to toe with you on all of those different things. And in fact, I had to start seeing a therapist just to talk it through and to try and figure out. Did you go see a therapist?
I've been seeing a therapist every week for 9.5 months.
Yeah. It helps though.
Oh yeah, it really does.
It does.
Just someone else to talk to, and someone that can give you some guidance and empathize.
Right.
This is crazy stuff, and people just don't understand it. So trying to talk to a normal person about this, they're like, come on, just walk a little more. You'll be fine. Right. You look fine. Come on, let's go. Let's go golf. And I'm like, dude, no.
At work, they started calling me Honest John because I had no filter. So if you were wearing something that looked like crap, I would just tell you, I mean, and in the television world.
It doesn't go over so big.
Like, what are you wearing that for today? You want viewers to turn to the other station? Yeah, I mean, and the weatherman would laugh and he'd say, oh, Honest John is back. I love Honest John. But, it was just awful. I had no filter and I could fly off the handle. And God willing, I got through it, and people kind of took me with a grain of salt during that time.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I understand what you're going through. So did your family or work life suffer because of the emotional effects of prednisone?
My family had some impact. So my sister and her boyfriend were visiting at that time, and I had a interaction with her boyfriend that caused him to go back to San Francisco the next morning. I mean, I apologized for it. We kind of made up, but he still went back to San Francisco the next morning. I was rough to be around. And I see that now, and it all made sense at the time, but yeah, it's no filter, being direct, getting upset at the smallest things. It was awful. Yeah. I literally called a psychiatrist pleading with him that I needed something. And so that day he called me and goes, "Are you on prednisone?"
Really?
I'm like, yes. He was like, okay, what's your pharmacy? So he calls in a script for Depakote.
Okay.
Which helps to settle down your mania and helps a little bit with depression.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, but
and then
did it work? Did it help?
It helped with the mania part. It wasn't doing anything for the depression side. So then we added Effexor to that, which has been helping some. And then we more recently added Wellbutrin to that cocktail. So of the 10 medications, 3 are to deal with side effects.
Right. So let's get back to the prednisone and its intended effect. Did it actually help with the sarcoidosis?
So we had a second PET scan in July.
Yeah. And
it was improved, maybe 40 to 50%, but not clear. You could still see a glow of red in the heart. So we had to continue the regimen. And then by December 29th, I had a PET scan again, and it came back clear.
Okay.
So it's out of my heart now. The arrhythmias are gone. It's out of my heart. And I'm starting to say goodbye to prednisone.
Now, how about scar tissue left behind? Because that can be an issue. You get the sarcoidosis under control, but it tends to leave scar tissue behind, and that doesn't heal.
Right. So I don't know the answer to that. I would, from what I know, the arrhythmias have been a very small burden. So like less than 2 or 3% of the time, my heart is in some sort of arrhythmia, whether it's a PVC or a VT or AFib. It's a very small percentage of the time. So I infer from that the scarring is not that bad.
Wow. You're lucky.
I am very lucky. I had a second opinion by a electrophysiologist, and he told me that he's never seen a case where from presentation to diagnosis it was so fast. So it was under 2 months that I presented with AFib and was diagnosed with cardiac sarcoidosis.
Right. Yeah.
And had an implant, and things were turned around. So I was really, really fortunate and appreciative of the team that I had at that time, that they got me through that event.
Now, you had mentioned that back in November, so we're speaking in early March of 2021. So basically, 4 months ago, 5, give or take, because I'm not really counting much for March right now. You were in a really dark place, November 2020.
Yeah. So it was the end of about 4 months of just deep depression and chronic fatigue. I, for whatever reason, would get up in the morning, get my coffee, and by an hour or two later, I'm ready for a nap. Mm-hmm. And I'm just laying down. And when I would wake up from the nap, I'd have brain fog and would be like moping around, wandering around, not going anywhere because of the pandemic, and go back to bed for a nap, and really had no life, right? It was just, so between the fatigue, so walking up the stairs, I'd be out of breath, and just going back to bed was the only thing I felt I could do. It was awful. And, people are telling me, just go out for a walk, be active, you'll feel better. I'm like, I can't even get up the stairs. How am I going to go for a walk? It was a really dark place. Worst I've ever felt in my entire life. And I'm sure part of it was depression from, I have this disease that's gotten active and the life I had is no longer. And part of it is what they call parasarcoidosis, which is the side effect of sarcoidosis being active in your body.
Tell me about that, because I don't think I've heard that term before, parasarcoidosis.
So when sarcoidosis is active, your immune system is creating the granulomas. And when that granuloma is formed, it is excreting chemical signals, cytokines, that cause more inflammation and other things going on. So if what you see happening is not a result of the granulomas forming, they call it parasarcoidosis. So one of the things that can happen is you can get these really bad sores on your shins. I forget the name of it, but it's really nasty. It's really tender and sore. And it's a direct result of sarcoidosis being active. But if you go into that tissue, there's no granulomas. So it's a side effect or a knock-on effect of sarcoidosis. Does that make sense?
When you say sores on your shins, this is triggering some things that I'm trying to think back through my own case. What kind of sores are we talking about? Because I used to get like these little small scabs, for lack of a better word, on my shins. I just attributed to dry skin, but they weren't terrible, but they were unexplainable.
Yes, so that was probably parasarcoidosis.
Really?
Yes.
That was pre-diagnosis for me for probably 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's one of those mysteries that were like, I don't know. So that was probably an indication that sarcoidosis was active. One of the other things it does is it messes with your brain chemistry, induces depression.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at some of the studies that were done, like people that had sarcoidosis in their lungs have and I'm not quoting anything, but the general idea I had was like 40 to 50% of those people have some form of depression. And if you have it in more than one or two body areas, like lungs, lymph nodes, and heart, the incidence of depression goes up to somewhere between 70 and 80%. So the mental, the emotional, that's a side effect. That's just the disease impacting your brain chemistry.
Is that where the brain fog comes from too?
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Right. Yeah. and I play one on a podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you've had plenty of doctors on that. And
I've had lots of doctors on. I need to probably get somebody in to just talk about parasarcoidosis, because that sounds.
Oh my gosh!
An area
I could send you some articles, and maybe we can cross-reference the doctors that were involved. That would be great.
Yeah, do that. And also for the listeners, I'll put links in the show notes so they could read the articles too.
Okay.
If you're okay with that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research on it. So
yeah, I know.
Because one of the benefits of having mania, like the manic depressive, I focused my mania on like sarcoidosis research. It was like, oh my god, look at this. This is all related, and this is how it was crazy, But at the end of the day, some of that was probably valuable, some of it's probably irrelevant, but it was nonetheless an interesting process at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning. Wow. Now you are no longer working, right?
Correct. So for 30 years, I was a project manager, program manager, leader of project management for Siemens, which is a global engineering technology company. I left them in 2013 after my diagnosis with sarcoidosis, and then started my own company doing training and consulting and assessments for various organizations that value project management. And right now I'm not doing that at all. I don't feel I could get up in front of an audience of professionals and have a reasonable conversation and have the energy level to do that. So yeah, I've been on disability since August.
Now, I believe, looking at my notes from our conversations, you were on methotrexate for a while as well. Are you still?
No, I was on methotrexate for about 3 weeks.
3 weeks. That's short.
They did a blood test, and my liver enzymes were out of whack. And so it was actually on my way from my second PET scan that my rheumatologist called me and says, stop taking it right now. Like serious.
Because of your liver enzyme.
It was so bad. Yeah. It went from, AST or ALT, one of those went from 40 to 240.
Yeah. Ooh,
it was off the charts. He's like, just stop. And so that was the first of several challenges that I had in this journey. Was, okay, methotrexate's not working. So then what? So we're out. Methotrexate is like the default secondary steroid sparing agent.
Yep.
So what's the next one?
Yeah. So did you go to Remicade or what happened?
I called it herding the cats, trying to get my rheumatologist, my electrophysiologist, my cardiomyopathy, my pulmonologist, trying to get them all on the same page to make a decision as to what the third drug's going to be. And it literally took like 2 months to get an answer.
Really?
And yes. And
I'm surprised you got an answer at all. What was the answer?
It was Cellcept.
Okay.
Which is an immune modulator.
Okay.
So I've been taking that. I'm up to 2 grams a day. And I've been tapering my prednisone since I had the third PET scan.
Okay. So Cellcept, that's interesting because people have heard me talk. I had a neurologist and a rheumatologist both, and they worked on the same floor at a local medical center. and they could not agree on what my path forward should be. And I mean, they worked on the same floor, and I would have this conversation with them. But and honestly, I think some of it was ego related. And,
it's ego. It's, there's pluses and minuses to every medication. Probably more minuses than pluses with a lot of them.
Right.
So the one thing I didn't mention is in April, when I had my ICD implanted, I had a team of cardiologists at a cardiology consulting company. I had my primary care in Einstein, which is a hospital system. And I had my pulmonologist in Jefferson, downtown Philadelphia. In June, shortly after Prednisone started affecting my mental capacity, something inside of me said, I can't handle this. I had a call so I went to FSR's website. And they listed Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia as one of their sarcoidosis centers of excellence. So I called up one day and I said, I'd like to speak with someone in your sarcoidosis center of excellence. They're like, oh, hold on a minute. And like 5 minutes later, I'm talking to the director of the sarcoidosis program.
No way.
He's like, oh, would you like to set up a telehealth meeting? I'm like, yes, I would. And we had a telehealth meeting, and we had a great conversation for about an hour. Where
an hour,
because nothing was going on, right? Nobody was going to hospital visits. Nobody was going to doctor's visits. Everything was shut down except for the emergency department and everything else. So from that standpoint, it was good that I was able to get some really good appointments with people that weren't seeing anyone else. So we had this long conversation, and I moved everything into Jefferson. So I said goodbye and thank you to my cardiologist. I said goodbye to my primary care, and I moved everything over into Jefferson over the course of a few months. And so they're all in the same system now. And they still don't talk to each other.
Well, now I would
but at least I can see them on the same portal.
Right. At least, you're all there. I mean, they're somewhat, it's got to be easier. But for me going, I still have a local doctor. I'm a rheumatologist, but I also am seeing a pulmonologist and a neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic, and I can't sing their praises enough.
Sure.
Because they do talk to each other. They have a center there, but it's all under one roof, and every doctor is involved at Cleveland in deciding what the next step is going to be. Going all the way up to Dr. Culver, who is the guru there, who oversees the whole clinic. So so that has been a pleasant surprise. And if anybody's listening, I just would encourage medical centers, sarcoidosis centers, to really follow that model, because it works.
Yes, and I have had numerous conversations with their head of the sarcoidosis program that you really don't have a sarcoidosis program. You have a specialist who understands sarcoidosis. I've seen him on YouTube, but you need a case manager. You need somebody to oversee this and quarterback it, and it shouldn't be the patient.
That's right.
And that's the big missing for me right now, is having a complex case manager. I'm like, what do you do for cancer patients? Do you make them manage all this while they're going through chemotherapy, or do you have a case manager? So we're working on it.
That's interesting.
I'm trying to get them to see my perspective and my point of view, and make some changes that would be better for the person behind me. I also think they need a support group at the program. Right. Yeah, that's something that I'm looking at possibly getting involved in and starting up.
I was very close to launching a support group here locally when the pandemic took over.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, we have a national online support group. Are you familiar with that?
Which one? The one that's run through FSR?
No. Frank Rivera runs it.
Oh, Frank's. I'm familiar with Frank's. Sure.
Yeah. Hop on sometime. It's great.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your input and point of view and all of that, and just talk to fellow Sarc warriors. It's great.
Right. Well, and and I've been meaning to do it, but honestly, the
first
podcast,
Tuesday and third Thursday of every month.
yeah, third Thursday of every month. Well, and I'll put that back out there. I've interviewed Frank twice.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Unbelievable.
And I don't know how he's one of the sickest people I know in terms of the sarcoidosis community, and he does the most.
Yeah. And you know what? That's probably why he's still kicking.
Could be. Keeps him going.
Yeah.
Could be. I mean, we're supposing that, but it wouldn't surprise me. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I follow him on Facebook, and I see his posts pretty regularly.
Yeah. We got to keep him in our prayers.
That's right, for sure. So where are you now? What do you think happens from this point forward for you?
All right. So I have a clear heart. So they did a PET scan, and it came back clear in December. Since late October, I have been tapering my prednisone very slowly.
So what are you on now? 5, 10?
About 8.
8. Yep.
So
okay.
I started off at 5 milligrams every 2 weeks, dropping.
Yep.
And now I'm 1 milligram every 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I'm 8 for 2 weeks, then 7 for 2 weeks, then 6 for 2 weeks, then 5 for 2 weeks. And we're monitoring. At some point, my adrenals have to kick back on and produce their own cortisol.
Right.
And if that doesn't happen, then I need to pause and maybe up the steroids to survive, and then try it again. Try tapering down across that point. So that's the point that I'm in right now. I'm holding steady at 2 grams a day of Celcept as my steroid sparing agent. I'm starting to taper down on my manic depression drug. So my Depakote is down to half of what I was taking before. And, it's just trying to make peace with the new normal, get as many of these pharmaceuticals out of my body as I can.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
That's where I am. And how much are you still mourning the loss of the life you once lived?
It's still there. I'm getting more of that life back every day. So between November and now, I feel 100% better. Like I have more energy. I'm not taking naps. The brain fog is easing. So I feel better, but I'm still a fraction of what I was when I was working for Siemens and traveling the world and managing a $30 billion project organization. I could not do anything like that today, but I'm getting better. So I feel good about that, and I like the direction it's going. And every day you gotta work on your mind, body, soul. So I continue to do a lot of meditation.
Oh, okay.
I've kind of zeroed in on, for now, what they call yoga nidra. It is you lay still, you don't move a muscle, and you listen to the guided meditation, and they tell you to think about your fingers, you think about your toes, your knees, your hips, your heart. They basically walk you through your entire body, and as you think about your fingers, you're activating your nervous system all the way down to your fingers, all the way down to your wrist, all the way down to your elbow. And it's like a massage for your nervous system. And you walk away feeling very relaxed. And it's a way of
yourself at home, or
yes, you just lay down, put your earbuds in, and listen to YouTube, Yoga Nidra, and pick one and try it. I love Allie Booth-Royd. She's my favorite, but shout out to her. But there's a lot of guided meditations out there, and pick one that works. But it has been immensely helpful for me, particularly with fatigue, because they say 30 minutes of Yoga Nidra is like 2 hours of deep sleep. So it's very restorative.
Wow.
And it just calms your nervous system. And that's been a big help.
And the keto diet, are you doing any diet adjustments? Are you still doing
so I went from the Western diet, which was go shopping at the grocery store and pick a package.
Right.
I don't do any packaged food anymore. It's all whole foods, vegetables. So I'm somewhere between like the Wahls protocol, WAHLS. She's a doctor who had, I think it was multiple sclerosis, and was in a wheelchair and declining, and she's a doctor. And she's like, this is ridiculous. And she opened up the textbooks and the nutrition books and started eating tons and tons of vegetables, eating the rainbow, they say, red and green and yellow and purple. And a year later, she's walking. And 2 years later, she's riding her bike.
Wow.
And she's now a life coach. And there's the whole WALS protocol, which is a specific type of diet for anti-inflammation, anti-chronic disease, anti-dying, I would say.
Yeah, right. Well, and I'm doing this elimination diet that I've been talking about on the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I'm pretty sure they're going to be the same thing or very similar.
So here's my takeaway: get sugar out of your diet, 100%.
Okay.
Right? Anything sugar, soda, fruit juice, cookies, cakes, ice cream, anything with pure sugar, the derivatives, sucrose, corn syrup, it's got to go. It is extremely inflammatory and not good for you. Yeah. Next, increase your fats, right?
This is what you're doing. This is why you're endorsing it. Okay.
Yeah. This is what I'm doing. I'm following Dave Asprey. He is the founder of Bulletproof Coffee and the original biohacker, which is now a common term, but at the time it was something he coined.
Okay.
And he has so Bulletproof Coffee, you're putting butter and coconut oil and full cream in your coffee in the morning. And it is unbelievable. Okay. And it's the best thing in the world for you to keep you in ketosis.
How about that? Okay.
And it's delicious. I mean, it's like creamy and silky and smooth. And everyone I've talked to, and everyone who likes coffee loves Bulletproof Coffee. So there's another shout out to Dave Asprey. He's been a big influence.
All right. Send me a link to that as well, if you don't mind. And because people are going to want to know more about this. So I'll just put it out there so they can check it out. All right. So you have changed your diet, which I think is key. I'm going to be talking more and more about that on the podcast. It is
key.
Have you eliminated gluten?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For the most part. Okay. So like every once in a while I'll have a hoagie, but on a day-to-day basis, I am not eating gluten. I am not eating wheat. I am not eating sugar. I am eating simple proteins, small amounts, 4 ounces maximum at a meal. Mm-hmm. And a plate full of vegetables.
All right. So free range organic chicken, grass-fed beef.
Yep. Grass-fed, range grown, what do they call it? Humanely killed.
Yeah. Right.
So when they take the cow and they put them in the chute and they get all stressed out, all those stress hormones end up in their meat. Uh-huh. And then they kill them and you eat it. And so you're eating all those stress hormones, and that's the theory and science behind why you want free range chicken, no hormones, no antibiotics, nothing. No. Because they're all inflammatory molecules for your body.
Yeah.
So organic, they're not using the pesticides and the fertilizers and all of that, which is very bad for your body. So you want organic, and it's not the cheapest solution, but it's better than pharmaceuticals.
For sure. Yeah, I've never been a fan of take a pill, solve a problem.
No, because it's the problem. It only solves the symptom. But when your heart's inflamed, you don't have much choice.
Right.
Because it could take you out.
Yeah. Get it fixed and then figure out the causation and the other things and take the long game.
My next step in the exploration is going to be fasting. So I'm currently doing intermittent fasting, which is, my dinner's at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And then you don't eat until like noon the next day. So your body's literally fasting for 14, 16 hours. And that causes your body to shift into autophagy, which is kind of like a maintenance mode for your cells. Like take out the trash and, kind of clean up. That's a good thing for your body and for your longevity, for your health. And I want to start doing like multi-day fasts, 2, 3, 4 days, work my way up to, just a water fast for multiple days. And that is supposed to be very beneficial for autophagy, for inflammation. And I've had several medical professionals tell me they think it would be very, very beneficial for sarcoidosis.
Really?
So I'm going to experiment with that and let you know how painful it is and what the results are in a month or so when I try it out.
You're approaching this the same way a Siemens project manager would approach it. Sounds familiar.
Actually, literally. So when I was, kind of having some issues with manic depression and brain fog, I couldn't keep thoughts in my head, and I would stress out about like forgetting that great idea. So if you look right behind me, this little wall here, that's my to-do list, and it's all visual. And
right.
Each one of those little stickers is something that's in process. So I have my backlog and something I'm working on, something I'm waiting on others, and then it gets complete. So it's just the way I've been managing the disease this year. And like 3-4 months ago, that was way fuller than it is now. So it's starting to calm down, and I need to get adjusted to the new normal. And it's springtime now, where I got to get outside and get exercising and stop worrying about what was and start dealing with what is. So,
right. Are you going to get back on your bicycle?
I am. I cannot wait to get back on the road bike.
Good.
It was horrifying. In like April of last year, I went out for a bike ride, and I got maybe 2 miles in 20 minutes. I was exhausted, and I'm in physical therapy, and they put me on one of those hand bikes.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go literally like 5 times faster and 5 times farther using my hands than my legs. I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah.
And it was all the prednisone that was melting my muscles in my legs.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to rebuilding that. I just started physical therapy a couple weeks ago, and I'm slowly coming back and building it back up.
Right.
That's my hope is get back on the trail in a couple of months.
Right. Well, Kevin, this has been a great talk. I appreciate you sharing your story with the listeners here on the Sarc Fighter podcast. I wish you all the best in your recovery, and
well, thank you.
Let's stay in touch. Let's see how all this stuff goes, and I need to put some links out to the Walls Protocol and the Yoga Nidra and the Dave's Coffee and
Bulletproof Coffee, yes.
And we need to look more at parasarcoidosis. So
okay,
you've answered a lot of questions and raised.
I will send you a few links. Okay.
Yeah, beautiful. All right,
great.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Kevin raises some interesting points. Sugar is evil. He also talked about the viome. I thought he was saying biome, like I refer to, but it's viome. And I'm going to try and find some more information on that. And it seems like that led to a probiotic made just for him, sort of a cocktail of bacteria that research and testing showed his gut needed. And I will ask him to send me a link for that. He mentioned Walls Protocol, Dr. Terry Walls, who uses diet to address autoimmune diseases. I did a quick Google on that, and there's a lot of info there, more than I can get into now. But it's been successful in fighting MS, so who knows? So basically, Kevin brought a lot of new info to the table, and I will put a link to everything that I can find that he mentioned in the show notes. If you'd like to contact me, maybe you'd like to be a guest on the show, you want to let me know if the show is helpful, hurtful, make a suggestion, please bring it on. and you can reach me at carlinagency@gmail.com. It's in the show notes. Please follow the Sarc Fighter on Instagram, and I've also got a Facebook page. Thanks again to Kevin for joining me here today. I'll let you know how I progress with this elimination diet as time goes on. And by the time I release the next episode, Lindsey should be, at that point, helping me reintroduce various foods into my diet. So we'll see how that goes. Appreciate you tuning in. Please tell one person. Until next time, keep fighting.
Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting